I'm Alma Katsu. I'm going to read to you tonight from my latest book, The Deep. The Deep is a sort of a reimagining of the sinking of the Titanic, but not just the Titanic. It also pulls in its sister ship, the Britannic, which also sank a few years later. The Deep is the story of a young Irish woman, Annie Hebley, who gets a job as a stewardess on the Titanic. And some very strange things happen while she's on board the ship. And then there's a sinking, and undeterred, she signs up a couple years later to work on the Britannic, which has been converted now into a hospital ship and is retrieving wounded from the Mediterranean for World War I. So we're going to jump in about 100 pages into the book. Rain pelts down hard as the hospital ship pulls into Naples that afternoon. Annie comes out onto the deck with a handful of nurses, everyone eager for land after 5 days at sea. The town that sprawls beyond the harbor looks dirty and squalid. The rain has painted all the buildings in muddy browns and sodden grays. Dark alleys slanting down the hillside, veining the city. On the docks, packs of children dressed in tatters run from ship to ship, begging for coins or food. Charlie told her they were stopping to take on coal and water, but looking over the side, Annie spots a caravan of men and stretchers approaching the gangplank. They will be taking on wounded too then. With war raging across the continent, this strategic port town is overstuffed with troops. The base's hospital is likely overrun with casualties. Apparently, they weren't looking to miss the opportunity to offload their worst cases. Annie huddles under her cloak, playing the vanishing game in her head. I am here. I am not here. As she waits for Sister Merrick, the head nurse, to decide where each patient will go and which nurse will escort the man down to his appointed ward. The parade hobbles up to Merrick one at a time, a long line dressed in mud brown and olive drab to match the streets from which they've emerged. Many are on crutches, some strapped to a stretcher. All have the unanimated faces of the shell-shocked, half-ghost. It always jolts Annie, the smells. In the trenches, the men have sometimes spent days, even weeks, surrounded by their own feces, rampant rats, and the remains of dead comrades. Many of the wounds are so deep and already festering with bits of shrapnel and filth that nothing can be done but hold them down as they scream, as their fevers rise. This one to D ward, Merrick says to Annie. She points at the man on the stretcher as though Annie is a field dog and expected to trot out smartly on command. Merrick acts as though she is the headmistress at a girls' school and the nurses are obedient students. Annie is glad to bend to the head nurse's iron will. Obedience is something that has always come easy to her. Almost always. She gives Merrick a curt little nod and mutters, "This way, please," to the orderlies carrying the stretcher. She is sad, though, to get out of the cold rain, which reminds her of a time before, when she was young and whole and altogether different. Rain's always done that to her when it touches her skin, like the kiss of the sea. Her gaze alights briefly on the face of the next man in line, and in that sliver of a second, she thinks she recognizes him. There is something familiar about his face. No. It is nothing more than longing, the same longing that made her see Mark's face on the journey to Southampton from Liverpool, that made her see his face in train stations and on street corners. They're only taking a handful of men on board, but they're Annie's first actual patients, and now she has an idea of what it will be like when they dock in Mudros in a few days' time, and she is surrounded by wounded. She imagines it will not be unlike when she was a stewardess with more than a dozen passengers to take care of. Out of the rain and settled onto the wards, some of the men become more animated. A few even joke with the nurses, ask when the tea cart comes around. The patient on the stretcher whom Annie has been escorting is a young man with the fair skin of the English, spangled with golden freckles. His eyes are open, but he stares past her. When she undoes the straps and strips back the blanket, she sees that he is missing both legs below the knee. She bends to help him onto a cot, struggling to get both her arms underneath him without jostling him too badly. She's learned the hard way that even those who don't seem to be in pain might cry out in agony if you handle them too roughly. And something as simple as moving a man's body from one surface to another can take an enormous amount of effort. She is breathless by the time she tucks his newly issued blanket up to his chest, making a note to reserve one of the ship's wheelchairs for him. "Water?" she asks. When there is no answer, she simply holds the glass to his lips, tilting it back until he takes a few sips. So he is responsive, not catatonic. She puts the water glass on the tiny stand beside the cot. "Do you need a bedpan? Would you like an extra blanket?" she asks patiently, but gets no answer. She spreads the blanket over him and tucks the ends briskly under the edge of the mattress. "There you go, nice and cozy. Please signal if you need anything, but a doctor should be with you shortly." The young man still says nothing, eyes downcast. "You're safe now." The words slip out in her desperation to comfort him. Perhaps to comfort herself, too. The ill feeling from this morning still clings to her, a shadow. "This is the HMHS Britannic, the largest, grandest hospital ship in the fleet. It's unsinkable, you know." Nothing. She stands and begins to move away, and then she sees the man that she mistook for Mark Fletcher across the room. 2 orderlies lift the soldier from a stretcher and settle him into the bed. Though she knows it's foolish, heartache pulls her towards him. She wends her way through the wounded, pulled by some invisible force. A nurse Annie doesn't recognize stands between them now, tucking a blanket tightly over her patient. "How is he?" Annie asks over the woman's shoulder. "Unconscious," the nurse answers without turning around. "A head wound. They said he slipped into a coma yesterday, poor man." Finally, the nurse steps away, leaving Annie with him. Now she can study his face all she wants to satisfy her curiosity and be assured that her eyes were playing tricks, that her fantasies have taken over once again, that she stares. She stares for what seems like an hour but can only be seconds, wondering if another vision has come over her, something half memory, half dream. But no, it is him. The man is Mark. He looks like Mark, but older, as Mark, of course, would be by now. Flecks of gray at his temple, his mouth more drawn, a few lines at the corners of his eyes, like delicate crackling on a vase, making it even more valuable for its fragility. But there's no denying. A vibration of knowing moves through Annie's body, even as other nurses bustle past her, ignoring her. It's him. Mark has come to her. Mark Fletcher has come back to her. This was the purpose of everything. Why she knew she had to answer Violet's letter, had to be here, on this ship, for the strange voyage with the dying. Somehow she willed this. Somehow there was a silent call between them, even after all this time, after everything. And now here he lies, half dead, but not dead. And this time he belongs to no one else. He is alone. He is hers.